Imagine sitting at home, watching the sky turn an unnatural shade of green, and within minutes, everything you have ever built is gone. That is not a movie scene. That is exactly what happened to the people of Mineral Wells, Texas, on the evening of April 28, 2026. What started as just another spring afternoon in North Texas turned into one of the most terrifying nights that this quiet community has ever witnessed. Families were ripped from their sense of security, buildings were reduced to rubble, and by the time the sun finally rose the next morning, the mayor had declared a full local state of disaster. This is the story of what happened, why it matters, and what it means for the people who are now picking up the pieces of their shattered lives. North Texas has a long and violent history with severe weather. The region sits in the heart of Tornado Alley, a stretch of land that runs through the central United States, where warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico collides head-on with cold, dry air pushing down from Canada. This collision of air masses creates the perfect conditions for powerful thunderstorms and deadly tornadoes. Residents of this region grow up with storm sirens, storm shelters, and a deep respect for the sky. But even for people who have lived through storms before, what swept through Mineral Wells on April 28th was something different, something worse. Throughout that Tuesday, a dangerous and relentless line of severe storms was already marching through the entire Dallas-Fort Worth area. From the early afternoon all the way into the evening, tornado warnings, large hail, and damaging straight-line winds hammered multiple counties across North Texas. Emergency alerts were going off on phones across the region. Weather forecasters were urging caution. First responders were already on edge, waiting for the worst. And the worst, it turned out, was still on its way. At 5:11 in the afternoon, the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for southern Parker County. The warning was not speculative. It was for a confirmed radar-indicated tornado that had already touched down and was actively moving toward populated areas. The tornado was spotted along Highway 180, just to the west of a small community called Cool, Texas. It was approximately 3 miles east of Mineral Wells and moving directly toward the city at 25 miles per hour. That left residents very little time to react. Within minutes, the tornado reached the northeastern section of Mineral Wells. It did not slow down. It did not weaken. It tore through the area with ferocious intensity, targeting an industrial zone and cutting a wide path of destruction through the heart of the community. Witnesses described a roaring sound like a freight train, which is almost universally how survivors describe a tornado in those terrifying moments before impact. Then came the destruction. An entire warehouse suffered catastrophic structural damage. Buildings were ripped apart from the inside out, with roofs shredded and walls collapsed. Metal beams were twisted and wrapped around utility poles as if they were made of aluminum foil. An HVAC manufacturing plant belonging to a company called Ventmatic was struck heavily by the storm. Fortunately, management had made the critical decision to send all employees home ahead of the incoming weather, which almost certainly saved lives. But the facility itself was left in ruins, with the company announcing that it would remain closed due to severe damage and ongoing safety hazards, including downed power lines. Beyond the industrial area, the storm spread its destruction into nearby neighborhoods as well. Trees were snapped at the base and hurled across roads. Downed power lines lay across streets, creating deadly electrical hazards in the dark. Debris was scattered across a wide area. Some structures were not just damaged, they were described by city officials as a complete loss, meaning nothing was salvageable. Entire buildings simply ceased to exist in any meaningful form. Mineral Wells. Fire Department. Chief Ryan Dunn confirmed that the storm resulted in multiple injuries. 2 people were transported to Palo Pinto General Hospital for treatment. Several more individuals sustained minor injuries and were treated directly at the scene by first responders. City officials were careful to note that, as of the initial assessment, no deaths had been reported inside the city of Mineral Wells. But that word of relief was tempered by the knowledge that the broader storm system had already taken 2 lives elsewhere in Texas, impacting communities across Parker County and other areas throughout the South. As darkness fell over Mineral Wells, the emergency response swung into full gear. First responders from every available local agency flooded into the affected areas to conduct damage assessments, assist the injured, and begin securing the scene. Emergency management officials directed anyone who needed shelter or assistance to the local high school, where the American Red Cross had immediately set up an emergency relief station. Residents who had lost their homes or who were displaced by the destruction were told to go there for food, shelter, and support. And then came the announcement that made the gravity of the situation unmistakably clear. Overnight, the mayor of Mineral Wells officially declared a local state of disaster for the city. The declaration was not a formality. It was a direct acknowledgement that the damage caused by the storm was so widespread and so severe that it exceeded the normal capacity of the city to respond. The official declaration stated that mineral wells had suffered widespread and severe damage, injury, and loss of property resulting from the severe weather, including damaging winds that destroyed and severely damaged homes, infrastructure, and utilities on both public and private properties. The mayor further stated that extraordinary measures were necessary to alleviate the suffering of people and to protect and rehabilitate property. Alongside the disaster declaration came a curfew, one that was both immediate and ongoing. Starting at 10 o'clock that Tuesday night, residents were prohibited from remaining or traveling on any public or private property within the most severely damaged zone. That zone covered a specific area bounded by Energy Avenue and the Country Club Estates. To the west, U.S. Highway 180 to the south, Washington Avenue to the east, and Boletta Drive to the north, all of this within the Fort Wolters area of the city. The initial overnight curfew was set to lift at 6 in the morning, but city officials made clear that it would not be the last one. Beginning the following evening, a nightly curfew from 8 in the evening until 6 in the morning would remain in place until further notice. Mineral wells. Police Chief Tim Dennison explained the reasoning behind the curfew simply and directly. The restriction was put in place to keep people out of the damaged areas, to help the victims who were still in the zone, and to protect their personal belongings from theft or further damage. In the immediate aftermath of a disaster, when buildings are destroyed, power is out, and emergency crews are still working in the dark, the last thing a community needs is unauthorized individuals wandering through what is effectively a dangerous, active disaster zone. The curfew was not about control. It was about keeping people safe and giving first responders the space they needed to do their jobs. City officials also directed residents to stay home and avoid all travel in the northeast area of Mineral Wells, specifically from Country Club Estates, stretching all the way to Lake Mineral Wells State Park along Highway 180. This was the corridor where the confirmed structural damage was most concentrated. Emergency crews were working throughout that area, and the combination of debris, unstable structures, and downed power lines made it genuinely life-threatening for anyone without training and protective equipment to enter. The National Weather Service announced that it would conduct an official damage survey of the area in the coming days to determine the exact strength and classification of the tornado. In the United States, tornadoes are rated on the enhanced Fujita scale from EF0 at the low end to EF5 at the catastrophic extreme. The survey team examines the physical damage left behind, looking at the types of structures affected, the direction of debris fall, and the severity of destruction to assign the most accurate possible rating. Given the level of destruction visible in mineral wells, including complete structural losses and heavily damaged industrial buildings, many weather experts expected the survey results to reflect a significant event. What happened in mineral wells is not an isolated incident. It is part of a much larger and deeply troubling pattern that has been unfolding across the United States. In 2026 alone, severe storm declarations have been issued across states including Montana, South Dakota, Washington, Mississippi, Indiana, Kansas, Illinois, Tennessee, and Louisiana. The skies over the American Heartland have been dangerously active, and meteorologists warn that this is not going away anytime soon. Climate patterns are shifting, storm systems are becoming more intense, and communities that have lived with the threat of severe weather for generations are now being forced to confront an escalating risk that is unlike anything in recent memory. Texas, in particular, has been hit relentlessly. The state has a history of more disaster declarations than almost any other in the country, and 2026 has added more chapters to that painful record. From the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex all the way out to the smaller, more vulnerable towns like Mineral Wells, no community has been immune. And towns like Mineral Wells, with limited resources and smaller emergency response infrastructure, often face the longest and hardest roads to recovery. For the people of Mineral Wells, the road ahead is going to be difficult. Families who lost their homes face the enormous challenge of finding temporary shelter, filing insurance claims, and beginning the long process of rebuilding. Business owners whose facilities were destroyed face financial devastation. Workers who were employed at places like Ventmatic now face uncertainty about when or whether they will be able to return to their jobs. And the emotional toll, the trauma, of seeing your community torn apart in a matter of minutes is something that lingers long after the physical debris has been cleared. But in the darkness, there are also signs of the resilience that has always defined communities like this one. Emergency crews worked through the night without hesitation. The Red Cross was on the ground within hours. Neighbors checked on neighbors. First responders put themselves in danger to help strangers. That spirit, the spirit of a community pulling together when everything falls apart, is what carries towns like Mineral Wells through the worst moments and eventually, slowly, toward recovery. The sky over North Texas will be watched very closely in the days and weeks ahead. The storm system that produced the Mineral Wells tornado is one of many that have swept through this region in recent weeks, and forecasters continue to warn of ongoing severe weather risk throughout the spring season. For residents across the region, the message is urgent and clear. Take every warning seriously, have a plan. Know your shelter locations, and when the sirens go off, move fast, because, as the people of Mineral Wells now know, a tornado does not wait. A state of disaster has been declared. A curfew is in place. Homes have been destroyed and lives have been upended. But this community is still standing, and standing together. And that, in the face of devastation this severe, means everything.